presenting sponsor of this episode is Scratch. Scratch is an innovative new yarn and crafts supply shop located in Lebanon, New Hampshire. They're committed to providing a beautifully curated selection of yarns and supplies for knitters, as well as roving, tools, and kits for needle felters. Their shop also features embroidery, sewing, and select fine art supplies. Scratch operates with the guiding notion that makers are curious and creative and should be able to find exciting, high-quality materials to work with all in one place. Scratch is also proud to offer Yarn Club, a monthly yarn subscription box that brings you gorgeous, hand-dyed yarn in nature-inspired colorways. You can find their full selection of yarns, notions, and supplies on their website at scratchmakerspace.com and on Facebook and Instagram at scratchmakerspace. Podcast listeners will receive a 15% discount with the code 2BROADS. That's TWOBROADS. Again, you can find them at scratchmakerspace.com. Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I have two special guests with me today here from Chicago Votes. So this is a follow-up to our episode about voting, and I'm really excited to talk to them. Okay, so we have Stevie Valles and Jen Dean. So can you tell me a little bit about yourselves, who you are, how you got involved in Chicago Votes?
I am originally from Ohio, and I've been working in politics now since 2012, just kind of bouncing around to the different career paths there are in politics. So I started in a think tank, then I organized on a presidential campaign in Ohio, worked in the Texas legislature as well as the United States Senate, organized around housing bonds, and worked for a gubernatorial candidate and ran programs at a nonprofit before coming here. So I've kind of been involved in a number of different capacities. What brought me specifically to Chicago Votes was the opportunity to combine all of those experiences and utilize those experiences to work with young people and get more young people civically and politically involved. Now, I just started as the executive director probably about 5 months ago.
Okay.
So it's been really cool.
Okay. I'm also from Ohio, as is my co-host, so we've got a good from Ohio connection going here. And so, Jen, how about you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Utica, New York, which is the largest refugee resettlement community in the U.S. So growing up, that's kind of how I got my introduction to politics, specifically the impact that it can have on people's life, for better or for worse. However, it's a small town, and I had to get out. So at 18, I moved to Tampa, where I actually started organizing. At the time, it was around legislation about sending U.S. soldiers to help with Darfur, which I started an organization at the time called STAND. And we had around 33,000 students call within a period, I think, of 3 months to push their legislators to take action. And that was my first kind of electoral organizing experience. And then I got into community-based organizing shortly after that. And then I went to graduate school. I got my master's in sociology, but my concentration was on violence prevention efforts. So specifically, I was looking at what community activists were doing in Chicago, what works, what doesn't work to reduce violence in our city. And that's how I got connected to Chicago Votes. I was recruited at the time by their leadership development director. And I just started out as a regular field organizer doing voter registration. I loved it, and then eventually worked my way up to a director level staff member.
Okay, fantastic. So can you guys tell us a little bit about what Chicago Votes is? So some of our listenership is in Chicago and may have heard something about you, but we also have listeners from other parts of the country who may not have heard of Chicago Votes.
Yeah, so Chicago Votes is a nonpartisan nonprofit that focuses on getting more young people involved in civics and politics. We really just try to shift the culture amongst the younger generation in Chicago about what it means to be civically engaged or politically engaged. We are, I think, one of the cool things, one of the more unique things about us, and I think it's also one of the things that make us really cool, is I like to think of us as a bit of a youth political shop. We do a bunch of different things that include building bases. So we organize in specific communities to build a base of voters who are engaged and care about issues that are young.
Mm-hmm.
We pass legislation, so we've been involved with the passing of online voter registration, same day voter registration, extended early voting periods, and the most recent victory was automatic voter registration. We advocate for specific issues. We have two new campaigns coming up called Financial Freedom and Democracy Done Right, which is focused on voting rights and economic justice. And we do all of that stuff while continuing to be led by young people, focused on engaging and activating young people, and just advocating on youth focused or advancing a youth focused agenda in the city of Chicago that makes life just better for young people in general.
And so, how are you defining youth here? Everyone seems young to me at this point,
Right.
but what's your primary focus?
We focus on millennials, so 18 to 35 is our primary group. We do work in high schools in CPS, so sometimes we'll have people 16 to 18 involved as well, especially with the One Summer Chicago programs. And just because they can't vote, that doesn't mean that they can't, pressure their peers to vote or make the experience exciting for young people who are voting for the first time.
And how many young people would you say you interact with in sort of a given year?
Thousands. I mean, we interact with actually like thousands of young people. We do a number of programs that give us the ability to interact with that many young people. One of them is our voter guide project, which Jen runs, where we distribute anywhere from 100 to 200,000 voter guides in the city of Chicago that are specifically targeted to young voters to tell them about the issues that are coming up on their ballot, where the candidates stand on those issues, and all they need to know for an election. We run the Parade to the Polls program. So every year there's about 10 to 15 or 10 to 20 actually Chicago public schools that we partner with to run parades from their high school to the nearest polling location, where all of the students who are old enough to vote go and vote. We do what we call Give a Shit happy hours, where we host happy hours in specific communities across the city and bring young people in to talk about the issues that they care about, and how to get involved in the process of changing the issues that they care about. And we also have our leadership development program where we've graduated over 150 young people through who now fill the ranks of civics and politics alike. We have a young man who is running his own nonprofit. We have another young person who was just elected to be the city clerk of Evanston at the age of 24. We have a young lady who is now on our board, who was the deputy communications director for Chicago Public Schools. So we interact with thousands of young people, but our level of engagement varies depending on where we're meeting them.
Sure. And can you talk a little bit about the March to the Polls from last year? Because I know that was a really big one.
Yeah, so Parade to the Polls actually began in 2012. And the history behind it, one of our organizers was in a school, and one of the students was just like, I really want to go vote right now. And the young man was like, well, we don't really have a way to get everybody we'll wing it. So they put everybody onto a bus, and the whole class went to go vote for the first time. And then we really sat down and thought about, it's one thing to register people to vote, but it's another thing to actually bring students to go vote for the first time, especially if they start voting at a young age. They're more likely to do that throughout their lifetime. So we saw the value in that, and we're ensuring that people were actually casting ballots. So that grew into CPS schools. We did, I think, 24 parades to the polls last year alone, specifically in CPS. And then we had our big parade to the polls with Chance the Rapper, which was obviously a huge success. We partnered with Social Work, Crime Fortune, and Ballot Ready for that. And basically, we met up at Virgin Hotel. We did good training for all of our volunteers, which was also BYP 100, and then a chance to a free concert in Grant Park. And eventually, I think 6,000 people showed up to the concert, and then around 3,000 actually voted for that election.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we've been talking some on this podcast in previous episodes about how to get young people engaged. And I think that that's a really exciting way to think about it, to think about things that they want to be doing anyway and incorporating voting into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that night I took my phone and I recorded how many people were actually in line to go vote. And I think it took up almost 6 city blocks of just young people in line ready to go vote. So when you think about it, it's like, oh man, you're wondering how to get young people out. This is how you do it.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I want to go back to a point you made about the voter guides that you put together. So our listeners might not know that you mentioned you're a nonprofit organization. And we actually had an episode that's coming out today, actually, as I'm speaking to you, about nonprofits and about the relationship between nonprofits and the government. And so one of the important points that we were talking about is that nonprofits can't be involved in electioneering. But I know that that's sometimes sort of a fine line. So can you talk about what you do in those voter guides?
Yeah, so the voter guides are ran on our 501c4 side of our nonprofit. We are allowed to endorse. We're allowed to be very explicit with who we are supporting, but we choose not to because we feel like part of the reason that young people and low propensity voters in general don't get involved in voting is because the interactions they constantly have around the idea of going out to vote are people telling them who they should vote for, why they should vote for this person. And really it's hard to just do stuff because people tell you you should do it. And it's especially hard to just do stuff when people tell you should do it when you're young.
Yeah.
So we put together these voter guides to provide very clear and concise answers as to where these candidates stand on the issues that we've worked with our base to identify that they care about. So when young people get this voter guide, they can use it to make their own educated and informed decision once they head to the ballot box. And the reason that we do it on the C4 side is because we are able to ask the questions in yes or no formatting. Okay. We do it on the C4 side. So, for example, if we ask a candidate, do you support legalizing recreational marijuana? Instead of the long, politically wonky answer that you'll typically get at a candidate forum or a candidate debate or any other voter guide that you typically see, the answer is yes or no. And so, you're able to use this voter guide, see the issues, see where candidates stand, and then make your own informed decision.
And one thing that's unique about the Chicago voter guide versus some of the other ones across the country is we also include a panel on voting rights. So we want to ensure that, not only are we talking about issue stances, but also making sure that voters understand that things like if they're in line by 7, they cannot be turned away from the polling locations. We also put down the election protection number on there to make sure that if there is an issue on election day, that they have a lawyer that will help them work their way through it. So also just making sure that our voters are informed and that if there is an issue on election day, they have a plan to fix it.
Yeah. And it's super dope. They're like pocket-sized voter guides. So when we do these parades to the polls, we'll have thousands and thousands and thousands of kids lined up to go in and vote. We just hand them, this voter guide as they're walking in. So if they don't know who's on the ballot, if they are not sure, just because they haven't been as engaged as we would typically like them to be, they're showing up to vote. So providing them with this information has proven to be super helpful for them.
Yeah, that's great. I always end up going through and sort of printing out my own,
Right.
sample ballot and then trying to figure out what I'm doing and what all these different things mean. So that sounds really